So this will be my review of the movie Heretic. If you haven't seen it, many people describe it as a horror movie. I would say it's more so of a mystery or thriller. But first off, spoiler-free review, very good movie. It was I figured because I had heard so many good things about it that it would be, well acted, well paced, all of that. Everything about this movie, I genuinely believe, was done as well as it could have been done. Was it perfect? No, but I mean, it was just so good. It was so intriguing. It really knew how to pull you in. It had a mystery that you really wanted to see unravel. I don't think it completely took me by surprise with the ending, but it didn't necessarily have to because of how well it was made. So yeah, spoiler free, I would say 7 or, you know what, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. Everybody did an incredible job, but especially Hugh Grant as the villain of this film. My goodness. He is so, and I'm going to start going into spoiler territory now, but he is so charming naturally that whenever that little bit of villainous just starts to come out more and more, my goodness, he just nails it. And there's never really a point, even towards the end, where it like cracks. Because as you go on through the movie, you see that it's all very orchestrated. That because he is this incredibly intelligent person, that's how he can construct like this jigsaw-esque situation. But he's never really surprised by much. Even whenever who ends up being our final girl is telling him, oh, you didn't see this coming, you didn't expect this. Maybe, like at little bits and pieces, maybe, but he never lets it slip. Even whenever she starts to figure it out, he's never like, oh no. And and I was waiting for this moment, right? Because often whenever there's like the horror film that has like a mastermind, whenever people start to figure things out, they always like go from like the cool, calm, and collected to like the anger. And he never does that. Even whenever, and again, remember, we're in the spoiler section of the video, whenever she stabs him in the throat, even then he doesn't lash out in anger. Even whenever he eventually finds her and then stabs her, there is this odd, cool, calm, and collected thing about him that I think just makes him so much more of an effective villain. But for any of you who haven't seen it, the film essentially opens up. It is about these 2 Mormon missionary women who, and forgive me, I should know the name of the actresses, but I'm kind of just going off the dome. My wife and I watched it last night. These 2 Mormon missionary women who are going door to door as Mormon missionaries do, trying to tell people about the Book of Mormon. And they have a list, and they're going through the list, and then one of the names on the list ends up being Hugh Grant's house. It's beginning to storm outside, so it's raining. And because it's raining, whenever they knock on the door and they start talking to him, trying to give them their sales pitch, essentially, he offers to let them come inside. Oh man, and it's so well done. I suppose that within, the Mormon missionary community, there is a rule where women or girls, however, you didn't really get a great idea of their age in the movie, but women can't be alone in a room with a man. I would imagine, especially whenever they visit somebody's home who they don't know, there needs to be another woman present. So there's that security, there's that safety, etc. So as soon as they walk in, they're like, we can come in as long as your wife is home. And he goes, my wife is home. She's actually currently baking a pie. Oh, goodness. And then whenever they sit down, they start, trying to tell them about the Book of Mormon. And it very quickly becomes apparent that he knows just as much, if not, you eventually learn pretty quickly, he knows much more than they do about the Book of Mormon, about the history of it, and about inevitably his problems with it. And he starts to talk to them, not just about the Book of Mormon, but about religion in general. And the whole time there's this eerie feeling because obviously he knows much more than he initially let on. And the whole time they are waiting for the wife to come in. And one of the girls especially is like realizing slowly that something is off. And he keeps telling them, well, do you like pie? My wife is making this blueberry pie. And then finally, he has gone out of the room a couple of times to go talk to his wife, to check on the pie, to do all of that. And he blows out a candle before leaving this last time. And one of the girls, the candle has been turned around on them. She turns the candle around, and sure enough, it's blueberry pie scented. And my goodness, it's just the beginning of this cat and mouse game almost, but even more so like a marionette, because he fully is in control of the entire situation. He eventually leads them to a part of their house because the front door is locked and they want to leave, but they're still trying to be very kind and very courteous to their host. They still view themselves as just guests within his house, even though they are feeling more and more uncomfortable. He eventually leads them to a back part of the house because he claims that his wife is back there. And then also, inevitably, whenever they do want to leave out the front, he says, well, the lock is on a timer. And they're like, well, that's very weird. And he's like, it is, isn't it? And there's this one moment whenever the mask starts to come off, whenever they're crying, they're so uncomfortable, they're nervous. And they're like, can your wife please just come out? And he goes towards the door, and then he turns around and just starts telling them, now I can go into that room, but do you still actually believe that my wife is back there? That whenever I come out, that maybe she'll follow, or that she was even in there to begin with. And it's like this incredibly haunting thing. And maybe I think this is definitely part of what leads into the horror of like the idea of being two young women locked in a foreign home with an older man who is bigger, stronger than them, and who clearly is, not that this necessarily would play too much into it, but is like intellectual. Like they're in all these ways. Not that the women are dumb, but it's just like in all these ways, it is terrifying. Putting yourself in the mindset of these poor girls who are in this situation. And he just starts going on these long monologues. And whenever I say these long monologues, I don't mean it in a bad way. They are incredibly well done. About, how Judaism led to Christianity, Christianity leads to Islam, and then the Book of Mormon, which he takes from one of the girls, he goes, it is what does he call it? Like the zany spin-off of Christianity, and how he believes all religions are derivatives of the one true religion. And that it's all about control, that it's all about consumerism. And he goes on all of these rants. But man, it is so incredibly well done. Like for somebody who watches so many movies, so many TV shows, who ingests so much art that I do, the fact that this movie is almost 2 hours long and it is held together so incredibly well by essentially 3 actors. It's amazing. It is amazing what human beings can accomplish with good storytelling, with drama, with suspense. And eventually, he starts telling them, all the religions, all these man-made religions are garbage. They're all, again, just derivatives. They're all just a carbon copy of the last one with a few alterations. And eventually the girls, whenever they realize their situation is more and more dire, they start calling him kind of out, being like, oh, well, what you're pointing out the couple of similarities, but you're not talking about the huge differences. I saw a lot online where I think part of the reason why people wanted me to review this movie is because, what does it say about Christianity? What does it say about religion? And it's like, though the movie was done incredibly well, and, I don't know the director's beliefs or their thoughts about Christianity, though the movie was done incredibly well, all the actual arguments basically boil down to fairly entry level, I would say, Reddit troll atheist comments of like, well, look, Jesus is a lot like Krishna and all these things. And though it is done very well in the movie, though it is very menacing in the movie, there's no real substance to the actual beliefs of Christianity or, to be fair, any of the other real religions. I mean, again, the guy points out issues that he has with the history of, like, let's say Mormonism. They go deep into that because, of course, the girls are Mormon missionaries. And he goes into, issues he has with Joseph Smith and some of the other prophets and things that they've said and comments that they've made. But it's like, a lot of it is this person, and part of the reason why it is, so well done by Hugh Grant, this person who has so much presence and who has so much authority and who clearly is far more well-read than these women, he can simply say all of these things and then they come off very authoritatively. And that is part of his point, I believe, also, or at the very least part of the point of the film, because as we go on, and eventually the girls are quite literally led into a dungeon where he has told them, I have found the one true religion. The one true religion that all of these other religions are derivatives of. And he leads them down into the dungeon, and there is this prophet of God. And she brings out a blueberry pie. And he says, my family's blueberry pie recipe is very similar to many others, except this time I've included, I believe he says, wolfsbane and one other poison. And what you are going to witness is a resurrection. And the prophet of God eats up the pie, and then she dies. She dies because she willingly ate this poison pie. And eventually, and this was actually a very funny thing that I didn't see coming. Topher Grace from that 70s show just has a random appearance in the movie. He plays one of the elders of their local tabernacle or their local church, who's coming by looking for the girls because they're supposed to check in at like 5 p.m. and it's well past then. And this was also like a brilliant thing done in the movie. So the girls, the way that they got to the house was they ride bikes, and they put bike locks and they lock them up outside. And during one of the times, whenever Hugh Grant left the room, whenever they're there waiting for the wife to come earlier on in the movie, unbeknownst to us, and they reveal this more towards the latter end of the movie, he went out, undid the bike locks, and got rid of the bikes. So one of the things that the film does really well is, like, often in these movies, like, people go missing and then somebody goes to look for them, and then maybe they're thrown off a little bit, but eventually they come through in the end. And again, please don't forget, I've already spoiled a good bit of the movie, but we're in the spoiler section. That never comes to fruition. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that they set it up and then it doesn't pay off. It doesn't happen because our villain here is like smart, because he's like a smart person. So he covers his tracks. So this elder comes and, you know, they talk for a little bit, and there's almost like a comedic beat where even though he's there looking for these missing girls, the kind of dramatic part is he's like, you know, there's one other thing I need to ask you. Have you received this pamphlet? And he just has, you know, the standard, I would imagine, Mormon pamphlet. And the guy's like, oh, you know, actually I haven't, but, you know, I'll look into it. And then that's it. There's no more of that. Almost kind of bringing about like the nihilism of the film, which is that like nobody's coming to save you. These systems, these things that you believe that are set up to like make sure you're okay, or that people have told you this is how it'll be okay, and then you have nothing to worry about. They're not coming to save you. You're on your own. And though you've escaped the control of like your tabernacle, your church, now you're under the control of this madman. And oh my gosh. So anyway, going back, and I know I'm going off on these tangents, forgive me, but incredible movie for anybody that's still watching. Very well done. The prophet died in front of them, and they were led off to another door because they were trying to get some matches that had fallen on the floor in an earlier presentation by the madman, by Hugh Grant. And they were trying to get it while he was distracted by the locked door. Anyway, they come back down to the cellar, and one of the girls notices that the prophet is in a different position. The prophetess is in a different position. And they're trying to light the matches because they're trying to light a fire to make some smoke come out through a port so that people can see outside, essentially. And then all of a sudden the prophet starts moving, and she has a prophecy that she tells him because she wakes up and she's like da da da, and she tells him these things. And then cut to a little bit later, one of the girls recants a near-death experience that she had, and she really starts to piece together. She's like, I think this is all orchestrated because, again, you've been telling us the whole time, this is all about control. None of this is real. There's no one true religion. Your prophet is just some actress, and then he cuts her throat. So even keel. You do not see it coming. It's a genuine surprise. But he just, boom, cuts her throat right there. And she bleeds out. And even this does not unsettle him because he uses it to his advantage. And again, it's all very orchestrated, and he uses it to, again, try to control the other girl and be like, well, your friend actually wasn't even a person. She had an in-arm contraceptive, and he cuts that out and he goes, see, this is what does he say? Is a microchip. Is a microchip. She's not a real person. And then he all of a sudden goes into this other thing now of, this is actually all to explain to you about this other idea that I've had, that we are all in a simulation. And then we go down this rabbit trail, and the girl, who is just like so distraught, she's like, I think you're just making all this up. And you can see, oh my gosh, because the same girl who's now still alive is the one who noticed previously that the prophetess was in a different position. So she eventually tells him, this is what I think happened. I think whenever we were drawn away by the buzzer of the front door, you had this other girl come take this girl's position, and this is not the same prophet that we saw before. Oh my gosh. And Now I realize I'm just summarizing the movie. Forgive me for anybody who's uninterested. But basically, she figures it out. She figures out that what seemed like a miracle, what seemed like a prophet dying and being resurrected and then having this prophecy was all theatrics, and that there's a hatch in the floor, and that down there is the body of the last prophet, the one that they saw eat the pie. And she goes down there and he locks her down there. And then she goes through all these rooms that are full of creepy imagery, like, satanic symbols and stuff like that. But again, it's all just theatrics, because it all ends up with her in a room where there are all of these women in cages, and the room is incredibly cold, and he comes down and he's like feeding them essentially like dogs. And he wants her to tell him, why are you here? Why are you here right here in this moment? What is the one true religion? And she says, as I've said a few times now, the one true religion to this man is just control. There is no one true religion. She is in this moment because it is exactly where he wanted her to be. Because he has orchestrated this entire night from whenever they first knocked on his door to where they are now with the friend dying, with all of it. He had it all planned out perfectly. And that is the grand revelation. The one true religion is just control. And oh my gosh. And he comes up behind her. And this is where his ego, this is where the little bit that it slips, where he lets it get the best of him, because he walks up behind her and he's like essentially mocking some of the Mormon beliefs. And one of the Mormon beliefs, for anybody that doesn't know, is they believe in essentially, I don't say magical to necessarily be offensive, but magical garments, holy garments, we'll say. And oftentimes the garments are underwear. So he comes up behind her and he's talking about, this, you thought, this was a part of your religious beliefs and this would bring you protection and your magic underwear. And right then she takes a knife, which I didn't tell you about, but a knife that they had a plan before that they were going to stab him and blah, blah, blah. And that plan was about to come to fruition whenever he cut the other girl's neck. So it completely sent all that. But she's had the knife the entire time. So he comes up behind her, right over her shoulder, and he makes the comment of magic underwear. And funnily enough, magic underwear was actually going to be the code word for whenever they were going to stab him before. So right then, terrible snap, right then, she takes the knife right into his neck. And then she runs away and she's all running around and da-da-da-da. And then she gets, because she's essentially locked herself in this circle, she gets back into the room where the prophet had been before, and she doesn't know what to do. And she turns around, boom, knife in the gut. Knife in the gut, and he's right there. And, oh my gosh. And she's bleeding out. She's bleeding out on the floor. And he crawls up to her because he's bleeding out as well, and they're both just mess. They're both a huge mess. And oh man, and he's about to stab her again because she's praying, and they have this whole conversation while they're bleeding out about the actual efficiency of prayer. But she says, I don't really care if there is no obvious sign of it's working, or even if because the girl kind of shows her hand a bit that she doesn't necessarily believe that it works, but it still makes people feel better. So she begins praying, and he comes up to her, and he's like, again, bleeding out of his throat. She's bleeding out of her gut. He's going in to hug her, and he hugs her and lays on her for a moment, and then he pulls back and he has the box cutter and he's about to put it right in her throat. And the friend from earlier, and it's interesting, it's kind of symbolic of he masqueraded this resurrection, right, with the prophet. And I'm not saying the movie is trying to say that the other friend resurrects, but she clearly just wasn't as dead as they thought. But he masqueraded this whole resurrection, and he's mocking resurrection earlier in the film, talking about Jesus and how it's very similar to all these other gods. But the friend grabs a board with nails sticking out of it on the floor, right in his head, nails him, and he's done. And then the friend who previously they had thought had died, then dies right there. And the one who got stabbed in the gut, she's with her as she's dying. She's praying over her. And then eventually she is able to make her way up and out and outside. And the last scene of the film, my goodness. So the final girl that we have earlier on in the movie, they were talking about death because the girl who got her throat slit, she talks about how her dad died of Lou Gehrig's disease. And there's some awkward silence in the room, and she talks about whenever I die, the girl whose dad did not die of Lou Gehrig's disease, the girl who is now our final girl, she talks about whenever I die, I'm going to come back as a butterfly. And I will find one of my loved ones and I will land right on their finger. And that way they will know it is me unequivocally. It will be a sign that it is me. So in that moment, she is now outside. It's the morning. It's snowy. And she is out kind of in this field. And she's bleeding all over the place. And a butterfly lands on her finger. And this is one of the interesting things about the movie, is that the butterfly lands on her finger and she's looking at it. And then we cut to a slightly different angle and the butterfly isn't there, but she's still staring at her finger like it is. And then she just kind of looks up and then the movie ends. And it's like, was it in her mind? Is this a final moment situation? And in my opinion, I'm sure maybe there are some theories online. I don't know. I think we are seeing her in her final moments. And there had been talk before in the movie about, these people in their final moments having these hallucinations. And we don't know. We don't know if this is a hallucination of hers in her final moments, or if it actually is the girl who saved her life, who died, who knew that she wanted to come back in a certain way, coming back and speaking to her. Coming back and, whether it's God letting her, or there's some sort of, reincarnation in this universe. Her kind of just coming back and like landing on her finger and being like, it is okay. It is okay. But man, really good movie. Really well done. I really enjoyed, and not just the acting, but some of the shots are very beautiful. The main villain, I didn't even tell you, the main villain has like this kind of dollhouse where he's mocked up the entire home and some of the trap holes and some of the extra places that the girls didn't even know about. And as the girls are going from room to room, he's moving these little dolls that he's whittled all around. And there's one incredible scene where they like run through a door and it goes to an overhead view, and then it so seamlessly cuts to the dollhouse essentially. And yeah, man, I could rave about this movie for a long time, but yeah, like I said, solid 8 out of 10, really well done. As far as like from the Christian perspective, we know that evil exists. We know that there are those who shake their fist at God and deny God all the day long. So whenever I see things online where people are like watching movies like this, where the information that is provided that's supposed to be against Christianity, that information can be so easily debunked with a Google search that would be just as quick as the Google search was to find the anti-Christianity rhetoric that's in the film. Yeah, none of it really rocks my faith. None of it really alters the beliefs of the Christian whatsoever, because there have always been doubters. There have been doubters from the very beginning. And some, no matter what miracle they are shown, there will always be those who don't believe there's a God, who say that the acts of God are actually that of the devil, or who simply just want to kill and destroy, just like the main villain of this film. And yeah, there's a truth in that, and there's a beauty in, as best as you can, holding on to the good, like our final girl does. Because even in her final moments, whenever she gets in the room where all the women are in dog cages and it's near freezing, and she's still trying to tell them, I'll help you, I will get you out. And I think there's a beautiful Christian message in the most depraved situations, still trying to be that light for someone else. She takes off her coat and she gives it to one of the women. Like that's going to do them any good. But it's not even necessarily about the effect. It's about the effort. It's about trying. It's about doing your best and loving your fellow man as yourself. So yeah, I think, and I really genuinely believe, and it breaks my heart whenever I see some people disagree, not because I need to be right, but because I do believe it is true that we can find beauty in so many things. And in this movie, at the very least, I found beauty in art done well, even horrifying art, even terrible, not in its ability, but in what it's depicting, even in terrible art. You can see a craftsman behind the camera. You can see a craftsman in the actors, and behind and above the creativity of all those is the creator who created them, who is glorified in their ability because it shows just a fraction of his own. So yeah, man, Heretic, 8 out of 10, highly recommended. You don't got to see it, but if you do, I think you'll enjoy it. And yeah, if you're still watching, I truly appreciate it. God loves you, and I love you. God bless, my friend.